Welcome to Inside the Philippines. I'm your host, and today's story is one that's going to stay with you. This is Niall. He's 65 years old, Irish, spent his entire working life as an electrician in Dublin. Good bloke by all accounts, steady hands, steady life. The kind of man who showed up on time and did the job right. But then something happened that changed everything. A moment that made him question every choice he'd ever made. Every routine he'd fallen into, every grey Dublin morning he'd woken up to for 43 years. So he made a decision. A big one. The kind of decision that sounds brilliant at 3 in the morning when you're watching retirement vlogs on YouTube, when the algorithm keeps feeding you paradise and you start thinking, maybe, just maybe, there's another way to live. He had the money. He had the pension. And he had nothing keeping him in Ireland anymore. What happened next is a story about dreams and math, about what retirement vlogs show you and what they conveniently leave out, about the difference between living like a king and barely surviving. This one's going to stick with you because it could happen to anyone. It almost happened to me before I learned better. Here's Niall's story. In his own words, "My name's Niall. I'm 66 now, back in Ireland, renting a flat in Dundalk and trying to piece together what's left of my life. But 18 months ago I was convinced I'd figured it all out. Thought I was headed for paradise. Shows you how wrong a man can be. I spent 40 years as a sparky in Dublin. Electrician, if you're not familiar with the term, crawling through ceiling spaces in those gorgeous old Georgian townhouses in Ballsbridge, rewiring council flats in Tallaght, running cable through the soulless new build estates that kept popping up everywhere. It was good work, honest work. I was never going to be rich, but I was steady, and steady counts for something. Owned my house outright, a 3-bed semi in Clondalkin, nothing fancy, but it was mine. Had my routines, you know? Tuesday night darts at the local. Weekend matches at Croke Park when Dublin was playing. The same 20 or 30 lads I'd known for decades, same pints at the same pub, same conversations we'd been having since we were young men with hair and hope. I wasn't unhappy exactly, just existing. Going through the motions. Wake up, work, pub, sleep, repeat. 43 years I spent in basically the same 20-kilometer radius. Christ, when you say it out loud like that it sounds desperate, doesn't it? Then March of last year happened. I was on the job in Ballsbridge, big Victorian conversion being turned into flats for tech workers paying stupid money, up a ladder, running cable, and suddenly it felt like someone had wrapped a steel band around my chest and was twisting it tight. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Just pure animal panic. Next thing I know, I'm waking up in St. James's Hospital with my daughter Awaife sitting beside the bed crying her eyes out. That's when you know it's serious. When your 34-year-old daughter, who never cries, is sobbing like she's 8 years old again. Heart attack, not a massive one, the doctor said. I got lucky, they said. But the next one might not be so kind. Time to slow down, they said. Change your life or it'll end sooner than you'd like. I lay there in that hospital bed for 3 days, staring at the ceiling tiles and thinking about what the doctor had said. Change your life. But to what? More of the same, just slower? Retire to the same flat, the same pub, the same grey skies and €5 pints? Watch the same lads get older and sicker until we're all just waiting around to die? There had to be more than this. There had to be. That's when I started watching YouTube. Recovery at home was brutal. Awaife stayed with me the first 2 weeks, bless her, but she had her own life, her own job. Once she went back to her place in Rathmines, I was alone with my thoughts and my laptop. And Christ, the algorithm knows how to find you when you're vulnerable. It started with one video. Just one. Some British lad my age, sitting on a beach in the Philippines with a San Miguel in his hand, talking about how he was living on $1,000 a month in paradise. Warm weather, cheap beer, friendly people, beautiful beaches. Everything Dublin wasn't. I watched another, then another. The algorithm kept feeding them to me. Dumaguete retirement vlogs. Living like a king on your pension in the Philippines. Expat channels showing sunset after sunset, smiling faces, this overwhelming sense of freedom and possibility. Americans, Brits, Australians, all of them saying the same thing. The Philippines was the answer. English speaking, they said, so you don't have to learn a new language. Catholic, like Ireland. Easy visas. Cost of living so low your pension goes 3 times further. Build a house for the price of a used car. Fresh seafood every day. Warm weather year-round. I started doing the math. The house in Clondalkin was worth maybe €385,000, give or take, owned outright, no mortgage. My pension was $1,400 a month. Not amazing, but not terrible. In Dublin, that barely covered rent and basics. But in the Philippines, YouTube said I could live like royalty. The more videos I watched, the more sense it made. Why was I killing myself in Dublin? The weather was shite. Everything was expensive. I had no woman in my life, no real purpose beyond showing up to jobs I didn't care about anymore. My own daughter lived across the city and I saw her maybe twice a month. What exactly was I staying for? I found videos specifically about the SRRV visa, Special Resident Retirees Visa. Perfect for blokes like me. Deposit $20,000 with the Philippine Retirement Authority, and you're sorted. Permanent residency, no hassle, no work permit needed because you're retired anyway. And the deposit was refundable if things didn't work out. Safety net, they said. No risk. By June, I'd made the decision, listed the house. It sold faster than I expected, some young couple with tech jobs, probably making more in a month than I made in 6. €385,000, minus the estate agent's cut. By August, the money was sitting in my bank account, and I was filling out paperwork for the SRRV. Iowa Faye thought I'd lost my mind. We had a massive row about it. She kept saying I was running away, that I didn't know what I was doing, that I should stay close to family and doctors who knew my history, but I couldn't make her understand. I wasn't running away, I was running toward something, toward warmth and freedom and a second chance at actually living instead of just waiting to die. I showed her the videos. Look, I said, look at these people. They're happy. They're healthy. They're living full lives on half what we spend in Ireland. But she just shook her head and said, YouTube shows you what they want you to see, not reality. I thought she was being overprotective. Turns out she was right about everything, but I was too caught up in the dream to listen. September 1st, 2023. I boarded the Aer Lingus flight to Dublin, then the connection through Dubai to Manila. 2 suitcases. €165,000 in the bank. The house money, minus what I'd already deposited for the SRRV. And a head full of YouTube promises. I was 65 years old, and I genuinely believed I was about to start the best chapter of my life. Shows you how wrong a man can be. The flight was 14 hours total. Dublin to Dubai to Manila. I barely slept. Too excited, too nervous, too full of this fizzing energy that I hadn't felt in years. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see those YouTube beaches, hear the sound of waves, taste that cold. San Miguel. Paradise was waiting. I landed at Ninoy Aquino International Airport on a Tuesday morning in early September, and the heat hit me like opening an oven door. I mean, I knew it would be warm, tropical climate. All that, but knowing and experiencing are 2 different things entirely. Stepped off the plane into the jetway, and it was like walking into a sauna. 32 degrees Celsius at 8 in the morning, humidity so thick you could practically chew it. Immigration took forever. long queues of returning Filipinos with balikbayan boxes stacked on trolleys, a handful of us foreigners looking lost and sweaty. The officer barely glanced at my passport, stamped me in for 30 days tourist visa, told me I could extend it later if needed. I'd already started the SRRV application, deposited my $20,000, 18,500 euros, with the Philippine Retirement Authority before leaving Ireland. That money was supposed to be my safety net. Refundable if things didn't work out, the website said. Keep that in mind, because it becomes important later. Grabbed my bags and walked out into the arrivals hall and, Christ, the chaos. Hundreds of people waiting, holding signs, shouting names, taxi drivers surrounding every foreigner like seagulls on chips. Sir? Taxi, sir? Where you going, sir? Good price, sir. I waved them off, found the official taxi queue like I'd read about online, and gave the driver the address of my Airbnb in Makati. The drive into Manila was nothing like the YouTube videos. No beaches, no palm trees swaying in tropical breezes. Just traffic. Endless, choking, horn-blaring traffic. Jeepneys belching diesel smoke, motorcycles weaving between cars with entire families aboard, father driving, mother behind him holding a baby, toddler squeezed in between. No helmets. Mental. And the poverty right there beside the highway, shanty houses made of corrugated iron and scrap wood, laundry hanging on lines, kids playing in the dirt. YouTube never showed you this part. The Airbnb was in Makati, which the vlogs had said was the expat-friendly business district. Modern, safe, English everywhere. I booked it for 2 weeks at 2,500 pesos a night, 42 euros. Seemed reasonable for short term. Nice enough place, studio apartment in a high-rise, air conditioning that rattled but worked. View of other high-rises. The guard at the building entrance called me sir and saluted. That felt odd. I'm a Sparky from Clondalkin. Nobody salutes me. First thing I did was sleep for 12 hours straight. Jet lag and exhaustion and the sheer weight of what I'd done all catching up at once. When I woke up, it was dark outside, the city glittering through the window, and for a moment I couldn't remember where I was. Then it hit me. Manila. The Philippines. I'd actually done it, sold everything, left Ireland, started over at 65. The excitement came rushing back. Spent the first few days just orienting myself, walking around Makati, getting a feel for the place. It's modern, I'll give it that. Shopping malls everywhere. SM Makati, Greenbelt, Glorietta, all air-conditioned temples to consumerism, bigger than anything in Dublin. You could spend your entire life in those malls and never go outside. Food courts, cinemas, department stores, even churches inside some of them. Filipinos love their malls. But here's the thing nobody tells you in the YouTube videos. Modern doesn't mean cheap. I did my first grocery shop at SM Makati thinking I'd stock up on basics and nearly had a heart attack at the till. Imported Irish butter for 50 pesos, 7.5 euros for butter. Familiar cereal brands, the kind I'd eat at home, 200 pesos a box. Decent coffee, 500 pesos. I spent nearly 5,000 pesos, 83 euros on groceries that would have cost me maybe 40 euros in Tesco. The cheap food was the stuff I didn't recognize. Dried fish, strange vegetables, processed meat in tins with brands I'd never heard of. I'm sure it's lovely if you grew up eating it, but I'm an Irish man in my 60s. I know what I like. And what I liked was expensive, but I told myself it was fine. Just setup costs. Once I found a proper flat, got into a routine, started eating local, the costs would come down. That's what all the vlogs said, wasn't it? Live like a local, not like a tourist. I started meeting with real estate agents to find a permanent place, set up appointments through a Facebook group for expats in Manila. 3 different agents showed me around over the course of a week, and every single one had the same spiel. "You want to buy or rent, sir? Rent for now, I'd say. See how it goes, you know?" And they'd nod. But I could see the disappointment. The real money for them was in sales. They showed me condos anyway, 1-bedrooms in Makati, BGC, even Quezon City. Prices ranged from 35,000 to 55,000 pesos a month for anything decent. That's 580 to 900 euros. The YouTube videos had told me I'd find places for 15,000 pesos a month. Where were those places? "In the provinces, sir," the agents would say. "In Manila, this is the price." 3 times what YouTube promised. But what was I going to do? Move to the provinces immediately? I didn't know anyone. Didn't speak Tagalog. Didn't have a clue how anything worked. I needed to be somewhere with other expats, somewhere I could get my bearings. And here's the thing that struck me as odd. Every single agent, after showing me rental properties, would casually mention buying instead. "Sir, you know, foreigners cannot own land in the Philippines. But you can own a condo, just need to make sure the building is not already 40% foreign-owned. That's the law. Or if you want a house, you just put it in your girlfriend's name. Very common, sir. Very safe." I didn't have a girlfriend. Hadn't even thought about that side of things. I was here to retire, not chase women. But all 3 agents just assumed I'd end up with a Filipina girlfriend who'd need housing. They'd mentioned Tagaytay properties, cooler climate, cheaper than Manila. You can own the house if your girlfriend owns the land. It started to feel like part of a script they all followed. Red flag, right? Should have been. But I wasn't thinking clearly. I was tired, overwhelmed, and desperately wanted to believe the dream was still intact. Settled on a 1-bedroom in Salcedo Village, Makati. 45,000 pesos a month, 750 euros. More than I wanted to spend, but it was furnished, had working aircon, and was in a secure building with a guard. The agent wanted 3 months deposit plus 1 month advance. That's 180,000 pesos, 3,000 euros just to move in, plus agency fees. Plus I needed to buy basics. The furnished flat didn't have proper cooking pots, decent sheets, towels, fan, for when I didn't want the aircon running constantly. By the time I was properly settled, it was mid-October, and I'd spent nearly 300,000 pesos just on getting set up. 5,000 euros. Painful, but I told myself it was a one-time cost. Now I had a base. Now the retirement could actually begin. Then I tried to fill my prescriptions. The heart attack had left me on 3 medications, a beta blocker, a blood thinner, and a statin. In Ireland, I got them from my local pharmacy for next to nothing, covered by my medical card. Walked into a Mercury Drug in Makati with my prescriptions, and the pharmacist looked at them, shook her head. "Sir, we don't have these exact ones. We have similar, but you need doctor here to prescribe. Or you can try the hospital pharmacy." Went to Makati Medical Center. Nice private hospital the expat Facebook group recommended. The hospital pharmacy had one of my medications, but not the other 2. The ones they had cost 8,500 pesos for a month's supply, 142 euros. For 1 medication. The doctor, I saw just a consultation to get local prescriptions sorted, explained the situation. The exact brands I was on weren't licensed in the Philippines. Similar medications existed, but switching required monitoring. Or I could import my Irish medications, but that meant ordering from abroad, paying international shipping, dealing with customs. Expensive and unreliable. I ended up switching to the local equivalents and paying through the nose for the privilege. Monthly medication costs 8,500 pesos. In Dublin, it had been maybe 20 euros a month with my medical card. Here it was 142 euros, and I had no medical card, no health insurance yet, nothing. YouTube never mentioned this part. Not once did any retirement vlogger say, "Oh, by the way, If you have any existing health conditions, if you need specific medications, if you're not in perfect health, the cheap paradise might bankrupt you on healthcare alone. But I convinced myself it was just an adjustment period. Once the SRRV came through, once I got Philippine health insurance sorted, once I learned the system, it would get better. It had to. That first month in the Makati condo, my costs broke down like this. Rent, 45,000 pesos. Utilities, electric, water, internet, 8,000 pesos. Medication, 8,500 pesos. Groceries, eating the familiar foods I knew, 32,000 pesos. That's 93,000 pesos before I'd done anything, gone anywhere, had any kind of life. 1,550 euros. More than my entire pension. I sat in that condo one night in late October, aircon humming, spreadsheet open on my laptop, doing the math. If I kept spending at this rate, I'd burn through my savings in under 10 years. And I was 65. I could easily live to 80, 85 if the heart held out. The numbers didn't work. They just didn't. But I'd sold my house. I'd moved halfway across the world. I'd told everyone I was doing this. What was I supposed to do? Admit defeat after 6 weeks and slink back to Dublin with my tail between my legs? No. I'd make it work. Cut costs. Find the cheaper life all the vlogs promised. Meet other expats who were managing on their pensions. Learn the system. I just needed time. That's what I told myself anyway. And for a while, I almost believed it. November rolled around and I decided I needed to stop being a hermit. The isolation was getting to me. Sitting alone in that condo every night, eating dinner by myself, watching Irish telly on dodgy streaming sites. This wasn't the retirement dream I'd sold my life for. I started going to Bugsy's Bar in Makati. Discovered it through the expat Facebook group someone posted about their regular Thursday night meetups. Walk in and you'd see 20, 30 Western blokes of various ages, mostly older, all drinking San Miguel and swapping stories. Brits, Aussies, Americans, couple of Germans, even another Irish lad from Cork, my people, or close enough. That first night I met Graham, a Londoner in his early 70s who'd been in Manila for 5 years, retired accountant, living in BGC, seemed to have it all figured out. We got chatting over beers, and I admitted I was struggling with the costs that the cheap retirement YouTube promised hadn't materialized. He laughed, not unkindly, but like he'd heard it 1,000 times before. Mate, those YouTube wankers are selling you a fantasy. They make their money from the channel, not from living cheap. Most of them have online businesses, sponsorships, Patreon subscribers. Nobody's actually living on $1,000 a month unless they're in some provincial shithole, eating rice and dried fish 3 times a day. So what do you spend? I asked. He shrugged. Under 130,000 pesos a month, give or take, more if I travel. I've got a bigger nest egg than my pension, though. Sold my practice before I came out. You? I told him my situation. The pension, the house sale, the SRRV deposit. He winced. The SRRV deposit's not really refundable, you know. Not in any practical sense. They make you jump through hoops, takes months, and half the time they find reasons to keep it. But at least you've got decent savings. You'll be grand if you're careful. Careful. Right. Except being careful wasn't what I'd come here for. I'd come here to actually live, not sit in a condo counting pesos. I started going to Bugsy's twice a week, then 3 times. The lads were good crayak, and it felt normal, you know? Familiar. We'd talk football, complain about the traffic, share tips about visa extensions and where to get decent Western food, always buying rounds for each other, because that's what you do. Each session would run me 1,500 to 2,000 pesos, 25 to 33 euros between my drinks and the rounds I'd shout. Didn't seem like much at the time. Graham introduced me to the Burgos Street scene on weekends. If you don't know it, Burgos Street in Makati is where a lot of the expat bars are. Not the go-go bar type, I wasn't interested in that, but sports bars, British-style pubs, places showing Premier League matches at stupid hours. We'd meet up Saturday afternoons, watch the football, drink beer, and suddenly it'd be midnight, and I'd spent 3,000 pesos without noticing. The lifestyle creep was insidious. That's the word for it. Insidious. You don't notice it happening because each individual decision seems reasonable. Gym membership at a decent facility near the condo, 3,500 pesos a month, 58 euros. I needed to take care of my heart, didn't I? Doctor's orders. Exercise was important. Eating out became the default because cooking for one in that tiny condo kitchen was depressing. I'd try. I really would. Buy ingredients at the market, make dinner, sit there alone eating it in front of the telly. Felt pathetic. So I started eating at expat-friendly restaurants. Comfort food, proper breakfasts at Australian-run cafes, burgers and fish and chips at the British pubs, 800 to 1,500 pesos. A meal 13 to 25 euros. 3 times a day, and you're looking at 70 euros minimum. More than I'd spend in Dublin. The condo didn't have washing machines. Building rules, something about water pressure. So I used a laundry service, dropped off a bag, picked it up 2 days later, clean and folded. 2,000 pesos a week. 33 euros. Seemed reasonable until you multiply it out. 140 euros a month just for laundry. And the heat. Christ, the heat. November in Manila is supposedly the start of the cool season, but it was still 30 degrees every day. The condo's aircon was ancient, rattled like a diesel engine, but without it the place was uninhabitable. I'd try to economize, use just the fan, but I'd wake up at 3 in the morning drenched in sweat, heart racing, thinking I was having another attack. So the aircon stayed on. Electric bill went from 3,000 pesos to 7,000 pesos a month, 40 to 117 euros. Another hidden cost. Getting around was its own nightmare. The heat made walking more than a block impossible. I'd tried taking jeepneys like the locals, absolutely mental experience. Packed in with 20 other people, no aircon, stopping every 30 seconds, having no idea where it was actually going. Gave up after 3 attempts. So it was grab everywhere. 300 to 500 pesos per trip. 5 to 8 euros. Add it up. Grocery shopping, doctor's appointments, meeting the lads at Bugsy's, going to the mall. 40 trips a month, easy. 12,000 pesos minimum. 200 euros on taxis. December came and everyone was talking about weekend trips. Puerto Galera, someone said. Beautiful beaches, just a few hours from Manila. Graham was organizing a group. Did I want to come? Course I did. Hadn't seen a proper beach since I arrived. This was why I came to the Philippines, wasn't it? The weekend cost me 35,000 pesos all in, 583 euros. Ferry tickets, resort accommodation, meals, drinks, activities. Worth it, I told myself. Living the dream, I told myself. This is what retirement looks like. Boracay in January with a different group. Same thing. Another 35,000 pesos gone in 3 days. By February, I sat down with my spreadsheet and forced myself to actually look at the numbers. 4 months in Manila, November through February. The pattern was clear. Rent, 45,000 pesos monthly. Utilities, 8,000. Medication, 8,500. Groceries, 20,000 minimum. Usually closer to 30 when I bought Western brands. Eating out, another 30,000 easy, probably more. Laundry, 8,000. Transport, 12,000. Bars and socializing, 20,000 some months. 30 if we did weekend trips. Gym, 3,500. random expenses, new clothes because the humidity destroyed everything, toiletries, phone credit, the odd doctor's visit, another 10,000. Monthly burn rate, somewhere between 115,000 and 130,000 pesos, between 1,900 and 2,200 euros, more than my entire pension of 1,400 euros. Every single month I was dipping into savings to make up the difference. 4 months of lifestyle costs, not even counting the initial setup, 540,000 pesos, 9,000 euros. Gone. Just like that. On top of the 5,000 euros I'd spent getting set up, I pulled up my bank balance. Started with 165,000 euros after the SRRV deposit. Now showing 147,000, I burned through 18,000 euros in 5 months. At this rate, my savings would last maybe 8 years. I was 65. What was I supposed to do at 73 when the money ran out? But here's the thing. Here's the bit that makes me realize how deep in denial I was. I looked at those numbers, and instead of panicking, instead of making real changes, I told myself it was fine. Just needed to dial it back a bit, cut out some of the weekend trips, eat out less, cook more, be more careful with the grab rides. Next month would be better. Next month I'd get it under control. I kept telling myself that right up until the chest pains started again in March. The lads at Bugsy's all seemed comfortable, you see. They weren't panicking about money. They had nice condos, went on trips, ate well, drank regularly, so I figured I was doing something wrong. Maybe I just needed to find the secret they all knew. Took me way too long to realize most of them weren't living on pensions alone. Graham had his retirement fund from selling his accounting practice, probably £500,000. Steve, the American, was doing online consulting for his old company back in Texas, pulling in $3,000 a month on top of his pension. The Australian bloke, Davo, taught English under the table at a language school, another $1,000 a month cash. The ones who seemed to be managing on just their pensions, they lived in cheaper areas I never saw. Provincial cities, not Manila. They ate local food, spoke enough Tagalog to navigate without paying the foreigner tax on everything, had Filipino partners who understood how to actually live affordably here. The $1,000 a month retirement? It existed, but not for a 65-year-old Irish electrician who didn't speak the language, needed Western food to feel human, couldn't handle the heat without aircon, and had a dodgy ticker requiring expensive medication and access to decent hospitals. I was living the expat lifestyle, the comfortable, Western, familiar lifestyle. And that lifestyle cost the same as Dublin, maybe more when you factored in all the hidden expenses they never told you about. By the time March rolled around, I'd been in the Philippines 6 months. Setup costs plus 6 months of living, I'd spent nearly 25,000 euros. 151,000 pesos a month, average. My pension covered maybe 60,000 of that. The rest was savings, bleeding away month after month. The Excel spreadsheet didn't lie. The trajectory was clear, but I kept thinking I could fix it. Keep thinking next month would be different. Then my heart reminded me that stress doesn't care about your retirement dreams. March 15, 2024. Almost exactly 1 year after my first heart attack in Dublin. I should have seen the irony coming. I'd been at Bugsy's the night before, watching Arsenal get hammered by Bayern Munich, drinking more than I should have. Woke up late, needed to get to the SM to pick up some groceries. It was already hot by 10 in the morning, 33 degrees. Humidity making the air feel like soup. The condo lift was broken. Again. 5 floors up. I started climbing, carrying my reusable shopping bags because I was trying to be good about plastic. Halfway up the 3rd flight, I felt it. That steel band around my chest. Tightening. Squeezing. I sat down on the stairs, sweating, trying to breathe, telling myself it was just the heat, just anxiety, just stress about the money. But my left arm was tingling and I couldn't catch my breath, and all I could think was, I'm going to die in a Manila stairwell and nobody will find me for days. Managed to call a grab. Driver took one look at me and asked if I needed a hospital. I nodded. He drove like a maniac through Makati traffic, running red lights, while I sat in the back seat convinced this was it. Sold my house and moved to paradise just to die 6 months later in the back of a stranger's car. He dropped me at Makati Medical Center. I stumbled into the ER clutching my chest. The staff were brilliant, I'll give them that. Had me on a gurney within minutes, ECG running, oxygen mask on, doctors speaking rapid English asking about my history. I told them about the heart attack last year, the medications, everything. 5 hours of tests. Blood work, another ECG, chest X-ray, the lot. They kept me overnight for observation. The whole time I'm lying there thinking two things. 1, I might actually be dying. 2, how much is this going to cost? Turned out I wasn't dying, not that day anyway. The doctor, young Filipino cardiologist, very professional, explained it was severe anxiety and dehydration, not a heart attack. My heart was stressed, but not failing. The heat, the lifestyle, the worry about money, it had all caught up with me. My body was telling me to slow down before it made the decision for me. He recommended I see a therapist for the anxiety. Get my stress under control. Stay hydrated in the Manila heat. Keep taking my medications. Maybe consider if this lifestyle was sustainable for someone with my condition. That last bit stung because he was right and I knew it. Then came the bill. 85,000 pesos, 1,400 euros, for one night. For tests that told me I wasn't dying, just stressed and stupid. I pulled out my bank card to pay, and that's when it hit me. My travel insurance had lapsed. I'd bought 90 days coverage when I left Ireland, figuring I'd have local insurance sorted by then. But I'd been so busy enjoying myself, going to Bugsy's, taking weekend trips, that I'd completely forgotten to renew it. And my SRRV still hadn't been processed, some bureaucratic delay with my paperwork, so I didn't have the permanent residency status needed for PhilHealth, the government health insurance. I was completely uninsured, 65 years old with a cardiac history, living in a foreign country, with no health coverage at all. The nurse at the billing desk was lovely about it, very apologetic, very polite. But the bill still needed to be paid before I could leave. 1,400 euros. Gone. Just like that. I took a grab back to the condo, another 300 pesos I couldn't really afford, and sat down to figure out insurance. Surely there had to be options. PhilHealth was complicated. I could try to buy in retroactively once my SRRV came through, but it would cost me. Back payments, penalties, the works. I found an agent online who quoted me 150,000 pesos, 2,500 euros, to get caught up and enrolled. And even then, PhilHealth coverage is limited. The private hospitals barely accept it. You end up paying out of pocket anyway and claiming reimbursement later, which can take months and often gets denied for pre-existing conditions. Private health insurance was worse. I requested quotes from 3 companies. 2 of them rejected me outright. 65 with cardiac history? Too risky. The third quoted me 55,000 pesos a month, 920 euros, for basic coverage with a massive deductible and exclusions for my pre-existing heart condition. Think about that. 920 euros a month, just for insurance that wouldn't even cover the thing most likely to put me in hospital. My entire pension was 1,400 euros. After insurance and rent, I'd have basically nothing left. I started researching medical evacuation insurance. Maybe I could fly back to Ireland for treatment if something serious happened. But the flights alone would be risky. 8 hours to Hong Kong, 13 more to Dublin, 21 hours in the air with a dodgy heart. The insurance companies knew this. Medical evacuation coverage for someone my age, with my conditions. 180,000 pesos a year. 3,000 euros. I was trapped. Too sick to fly home for treatment. Too expensive to insure properly here. Too stubborn to admit I'd made a massive mistake. In the end, I paid the 150,000 pesos to get enrolled in PhilHealth. Figured it was better than nothing, even if the coverage was rubbish. The agent processed my paperwork, took my money, and warned me it could take 6 weeks to actually be active in the system. 6 weeks of being completely uninsured. I started rationing my medication. This is how desperate I'd become. The heart meds were costing 8,500 pesos a month. I'd take them every other day instead of daily. Skip doses. Tell myself it was fine, the doctor was being overly cautious anyway. Looking back now, I realize how insane that was. How dangerous. But when you're watching your savings evaporate and your pension doesn't cover your basic costs, you start making stupid decisions. April 2024. I sat down and recalculated everything. The ER visit had been a wake-up call. I needed to actually understand my situation. Monthly expenses in Manila with PhilHealth coverage, rent 45,000, utilities 8,000, medication 8,500, food and groceries maybe 40,000 if I ate out less. Laundry, transport, gym, all the little things, another 20,000 minimum. That's 121,000 pesos, 2,000 euros. Plus now I needed to set aside money for medical emergencies because PhilHealth wouldn't cover everything. My pension, 1,400 euros. Shortfall, 600 euros every single month. More if anything went wrong. And things always went wrong. The aircon would break. I'd get sick and need a doctor. Visa extensions cost money. Everything cost money. I'd been in the Philippines 7 months. Total spent, setup costs plus the ER visit plus 7 months of lifestyle. About 30,000 euros. Gone. 135,000 euros left in the bank. At this burn rate, 600 euros a month minimum from savings, my money would last maybe 18 years if nothing else went wrong. But I was 65. Things were going to go wrong. More health scares. More ER visits. Medication costs would increase. At some point, I'd need serious cardiac care. A bypass maybe. A pacemaker. Would PhilHealth cover that? Would I even survive long enough to collect? The math was brutal and unavoidable. The YouTube retirement was killing me. Literally. The stress of watching my savings disappear was worse than anything I'd experienced in Dublin. At least in Ireland, I'd had the medical card. Doctors and hospitals were free. Medication was subsidized. If I had another heart attack, I wouldn't wake up to a 1,400 euro bill. Here, I was one serious medical emergency away from financial ruin. And with my heart, that emergency felt inevitable. I started researching medical tourism, flying to Thailand for procedures, going to India for cheap cardiac care. But that meant more flights, more stress, more unknowns. And I'd still need somewhere to recover afterward. The Makati condo? Alone? With no family, no support system, no one to help if something went wrong? The realization settled in slowly, like damp through a wall. I couldn't afford to stay. But I couldn't afford to leave either. The SRRV deposit, my 18,500 euros, was supposedly refundable. But when I started reading expat forums about actually getting it back, the stories were grim. 6 months to a year of bureaucratic nightmares. Forms that needed to be filed in person. Fees that ate into the refund. People who'd been waiting 2 years and still hadn't seen a peso. I was trapped in a system that was too expensive to live in and too complicated to escape. That's when the anger started. Not at the Philippines or Filipino people, they'd been nothing but kind to me. But at myself for being so bloody stupid. At the YouTube gurus who'd sold me a fantasy without mentioning any of this. At Graham and the other expats who made it look easy while conveniently leaving out that they had income I didn't. And at Aoi Fei. God forgive me, but I was angry at her too. For being right. For warning me and watching me ignore her. For living her life in Dublin while I was here sweating and stressed and slowly going broke. I called her one night in April, middle of the night for me, afternoon for her, needed to hear her voice, needed to feel connected to something real. She answered on the fourth ring. "Da, you all right?" "Yeah, love. Just wanted to check in. How are you?" We talked for 20 minutes. She told me about work, about her friends, about life in Rathmines. Normal things. Things that felt impossibly far away. I tried to sound upbeat, told her Manila was grand, retirement was everything I'd hoped for. I didn't tell her about the ER visit. Didn't tell her about the money hemorrhaging from my account. Didn't tell her I was rationing heart medication because I couldn't afford to live and take care of my health at the same time. Didn't want her to know I'd failed. Again. When we hung up, I looked around the condo. This was my life now. 45,000 pesos a month for a box with a rattling air conditioner and no washing machine. No friends except drinking buddies at Bugsy's. No purpose except surviving until my money ran out or my heart gave out, whichever came first. This wasn't retirement. This was exile. Self-imposed, expensive, slowly killing me exile. And I still had 135,000 euros in the bank, still had time to fix this. I just didn't know how. May came, and I made the decision. I couldn't stay in Manila. The costs were unsustainable, and the stress was literally killing me. But I wasn't ready to admit defeat and go back to Ireland either. Not yet. There had to be a middle ground. Dumaguete kept appearing in my YouTube searches. The algorithm remembered what I'd been watching before I left Ireland. Provincial retirement paradise. University city, so there was some infrastructure, some English speakers. Beach access, Negros Oriental. And the costs everyone claimed 15,000 pesos a month rent, local food prices, the authentic Philippines experience. Maybe Manila had been the mistake. Maybe I'd been doing this wrong from the start. The YouTube retirees living on $1,000 a month, they weren't in Makati. They were in places like Dumaguete, provincial cities, where foreigners were rare enough to be interesting, but common enough that infrastructure existed. I convinced myself this was the course correction I needed. The real retirement. The one I'd sold my house for. I gave notice on the Makati condo, lost a month's rent because I couldn't give the full 60 days, another 45,000 pesos gone. Booked a flight to Dumaguete. Started researching apartments online through Facebook groups. Found a studio near the boulevard for 15,000 pesos a month, 250 euros. Finally. The YouTube prices. Shipping my stuff was its own nightmare. Couldn't take much on the plane. Ended up packing 2 Balikbayan boxes with whatever would fit: clothes, laptop, a few kitchen things, some books. 25,000 pesos to ship them by boat, 417 euros. Everything else I either sold for a fraction of what I'd paid or just abandoned. The pots and pans from SM. The decent sheets. The fan. All gone. I flew to Dumaguete on a Tuesday in mid-May. Cebu Pacific, 1-hour flight, cost me about 3,000 pesos. The Dumaguete airport is tiny single runway, open-air terminal, that immediate hit of provincial Philippines. Slower, quieter, hotter, somehow, without Manila's high-rises to block the sun. Grabbed a tricycle to my new studio. 200 pesos. The driver saw me coming from a kilometer away. White face, 2 suitcases, obviously new in town. I'd learn later that locals paid maybe 60 pesos for the same trip, but I didn't speak Tagalog, and he knew it. The studio was exactly what I'd seen in the photos. One room, maybe 20 square meters. Bed, tiny table, two plastic chairs, bathroom with a shower that was just a hose attached to the wall. Kitchen was a hot plate on a counter. The air conditioning unit looked like it was from the 80s, rattling and wheezing even when it was off. But the rent was 15,000 pesos a month. Deposit of 2 months up front, first month's rent. 45,000 pesos total to move in 750 euros, a third of what Makati had cost me. The relief was immediate, physical, like I could breathe again. I walked to the local market that first week. Bought vegetables, rice, dried fish, fresh mangoes. 3,000 pesos filled 2 shopping bags. 50 euros. In Makati, that would have bought me maybe breakfast. The local Carinderia, a little family-run restaurant, served meals for 60 to 100 pesos. A full plate of rice, meat, vegetables. 1 to 150 euros. San Miguel at the local bars was 60 pesos instead of 200. The math worked. Finally, the math worked. For about 2 weeks, I was euphoric. This was it. This was what I'd come to the Philippines for. I'd sit at the little restaurants, eat local food, watch the sun set over the boulevard, walk along the waterfront in the evening when it cooled down to a still sweltering 28 degrees. I was living on maybe 50,000 pesos a month, including rent. 833 euros. My pension would almost cover it. Then reality started seeping in through the cracks. The isolation hit first. In Makati, I'd had Bugsies, the lads, Graham and the expat crew, people to talk to. Here, there were expats, sure. I'd see them around. But no real community, like Manila, no regular meetups, no sports bars showing Premier League matches. The foreigners in Dumaguete were mostly younger digital nomad types or couples who'd been here for years and had their own established lives. I was the only white face at the local carinderias. People were friendly. Filipinos are genuinely lovely people. But the language barrier was absolute. I'd point at food, smile, pay, eat alone. The staff would chatter in Visayan, and I'd sit there understanding nothing, completely isolated in a room full of people. The heat without proper air conditioning was brutal. The studio's ancient unit worked maybe half the time. When it did work, the electric bill was insane. My first month, the electricity came to 4,500 pesos, 75 euros. Because the unit was so old and inefficient, it ate power just to produce a weak trickle of cool air. When the unit stopped working entirely in June, I had to choose. Pay to fix it. The repair estimate was 12,000 pesos, 200 euros, or suffer through the heat. I suffered. Bought a fan for 1,500 pesos and lay there at night sweating through the sheets, heart pounding from the heat, wondering if this was how I'd die. Heat stroke in a Dumaguete studio at 65. Getting around was another problem I hadn't anticipated. I didn't have a motorbike, didn't know how to ride one, and at 65 with a bad heart wasn't about to learn. So it was tricycles everywhere. Problem was, I didn't speak Tagalog, so I couldn't haggle. The local price for a tricycle across town was maybe 40 pesos. What I paid, 100 minimum. Sometimes 200 if they sensed I was desperate. I needed help. Basic things. Where to pay the electric bill. How to get my visa extended. Where to find my medication. In Makati, I'd managed on my own because everything had English signs and customer service spoke English. Here, different world. I hired a helper through a recommendation from my landlord. Rose. Lovely woman in her 30s, single mother, spoke decent English. She'd come 3 times a week to help with errands, translation, cleaning, laundry. 6,000 pesos a month. 100 euros. Necessary. But another cost I hadn't budgeted for. The medication situation was worse than Manila. No hospital pharmacy with imported brands. The local pharmacy had generic Filipino versions of my meds that may or may not have been the same dosage. I'd show them my prescriptions and they'd shrug, give me something close, charge me 6,000 pesos a month. Still expensive, still uncertain if I was even getting the right medication. For proper cardiac care, I had to travel to Cebu every 6 weeks. Book a flight, about 3,500 pesos return. Find a hotel near the hospital, 2,500 pesos a night. See the cardiologist, 8,000 pesos for the consultation. Get my prescriptions from the hospital pharmacy, another 10,000 pesos for 2 months. Supply of actual proper medication. Each Cebu trip cost me 25 to 30,000 pesos, 417 to 500 euros. 3 times a year minimum. That's 1,500 euros just for basic cardiac care. I could have gotten free in Dublin. The internet was a joke. I'd been video calling Awife once a week from Manila. In Dumaguete, the connection was so bad the calls would drop every 2 minutes. I'd see her pixelated face freeze, hear her voice cut out mid-sentence. We'd spend more time reconnecting than actually talking. Eventually, she stopped answering my calls as regularly. What was the point when we couldn't actually have a conversation? And the provincial hospital terrified me. I went once just to check it out, see what I'd be dealing with if I had an emergency. The equipment looked like it was from the 90s. No cardiac specialists, no ICU to speak of. If I had another heart scare here, I'd be loaded into an ambulance for the 3-hour drive to Cebu, if I survived that long. The beach retirement fantasy I'd imagined? Sitting on the boulevard with a cold beer watching the sunset? That lasted exactly 3 evenings before I realized I was just a lonely old man drinking alone, sweating in the heat, with nothing to do and no one to talk to. By August, 3 months into the Dumaguete experiment, I sat down with the spreadsheet again. Monthly costs, rent 15,000 utilities, 6,500 with the dodgy aircon and electricity fluctuations, food, eating local but still buying some Western comfort items like coffee and butter, 18,000, helper, 6,000. Tricycles, because I couldn't walk in the heat. Minimum 50 trips at 150 pesos average, 7,500. Medication from the local pharmacy, 6,000. Phone and internet, 2,500. Miscellaneous laundry powder, soap, toilet paper, the endless small things, 3,000. That's 62,000 pesos a month on average. Add in the Cebu trips for proper medical care and medication, another 8 to 10,000 pesos monthly averaged out. Total monthly, 70 to 72,000 pesos, 1,167 to 1,200 euros. My pension was 1,400. I was finally, barely, living within my means. Except I wasn't living. I was existing. Sweating in a concrete box, isolated, lonely, terrified of getting sick, counting every peso, slowly losing my mind from boredom and heat and the crushing realization that this was my life now. I'd burned through another 420,000 pesos in those 3 months, 7,000 euros between the move, the setup costs, the learning curve of figuring out provincial prices versus foreigner prices. Did the math on my savings. Started the Philippines journey with 165,000 euros. 8 months in, I had 122,000 left. 43,000 euros gone. And for what? A Dumaguete studio I was scared to leave, medication I wasn't sure was right, and complete isolation from everything and everyone I'd ever known. The YouTube retirement existed, sort of, if you were healthy, if you spoke Tagalog, if you had a Filipino partner who understood how to navigate the systems, if you were content eating rice and fish 3 times a day, if you didn't need Western comforts or community or access to proper medical care. I was none of those things. I was a 65-year-old Irish electrician with a dodgy ticker, no language skills, no partner, and a desperate need for community and decent health care. Dumaguete was cheaper than Manila. Absolutely. But cheaper wasn't the same as sustainable, and sustainable wasn't the same as livable. I'd solved the financial crisis by moving to provincial Philippines. But I'd created a different crisis entirely, one of isolation, inadequate health care, cultural incompatibility, and the slow, dawning horror that I'd sold my house and moved halfway across the world to die alone in a place I didn't belong. The savings would last longer here. Maybe another 8–10 years if I was careful. But what kind of life was I buying with that time? Sitting alone in a sweltering studio, afraid to get sick, unable to have a proper conversation with anyone, counting pesos and days until my heart gave out or my money ran out, whichever came first. This wasn't retirement. This was just a different kind of prison. One with better weather and cheaper beer, but a prison nonetheless. And I still had 122,000 euros in the bank, still had time to fix this. I was just running out of options for how. September came, and the isolation finally broke me completely. I'd been in Dumaguete 4 months. 4 months of sweating alone in that studio, eating meals surrounded by people I couldn't talk to, lying awake at night listening to karaoke bleeding through the walls, wondering what the hell I'd done with my life. Aoife's birthday was October 3rd. I'd missed her last birthday because I was too caught up in the Manila expat scene. This year one promised myself and her I'd be there. Proper visit home. See her. See Dublin. Remember what normal felt like. I booked the flights in early September. Return ticket Dublin via Manila and Hong Kong. 85,000 pesos. 1,400 euros. Peak season pricing because October was mid-autumn break. Painful, but necessary. I needed to see my daughter. Needed to feel like I still had a life beyond this concrete box. The plan was simple. Fly out October 1st. Spend 10 days in Dublin. Be back in Dumaguete by the 11th. Tell Aoife about the retirement. Show her I was doing grand. Maybe convince myself in the process that I hadn't made the worst mistake of my life. 2 weeks before departure, September 18th, I woke up with chest pains. Not the anxiety kind I'd had in Manila. Real ones. Sharp, stabbing, radiating down my left arm. Lying in bed at 5 in the morning, drenched in sweat that had nothing to do with the heat, and everything to do with the fact that my heart was giving up. I called Rose, my helper, woke her up. Told her I needed an ambulance. She arrived 20 minutes later in a tricycle with her cousin, who worked at the provincial hospital. They half-carried me down the stairs and into the tricycle. The ride to the hospital was a blur of pain and panic, and the cousin praying in Visayan. The Dumaguete Hospital did what they could. IV fluids, aspirin, oxygen, basic ECG. But the doctor, young Filipino guy who looked terrified, told me straight, "Sir, you need specialist care. We don't have cardiac facilities here. You need to go to Cebu now." They called an ambulance. 3 hours to Cebu by road. I lay in the back of that ambulance, convinced I was dying on the Negros Oriental Highway at 65, 18 months after selling my life for a YouTube fantasy. Made it to Cebu Doctors University Hospital. Proper facility. Cardiac specialists. They admitted me immediately. 3 days of tests. Full workup. Medications adjusted. Cardiologist explaining that I had chronic stress-induced cardiac dysfunction. Not a heart attack yet, but my heart was struggling under the weight of everything I'd put it through. The diagnosis was brutal in its simplicity. Chronic stress. Severe anxiety. Irregular medication compliance. They figured out I'd been rationing pills. My body was shutting down under the pressure of trying to survive in a place I couldn't afford to live in properly. "You need to reduce stress," the cardiologist said. Young Filipino woman. Very kind. Whatever is causing this anxiety, you need to address it. Your heart cannot continue like this. I wanted to laugh. The thing causing my anxiety was being here, and I'd sold everything to be here. 3 days in Cebu doctor's private room because the ward was full cardiac monitoring, medications, consultations, food. The bill came to 380,000 pesos, 6,300 euros. PhilHealth covered maybe 30,000 of that after weeks of processing. The rest came straight from my savings. I was still in the hospital on October 1st. My flight date. I had to cancel. Called the airline from the hospital bed, cancellation penalty, 15,000 pesos, 250 euros non-refundable fare. Another 70,000 pesos gone, 1,200 euros. Total cost of the trip I never took, 85,000 pesos, 1,400 euros. Just evaporated. Then I had to call Awife. She answered on the third ring. I could hear the hope in her voice. "Da, are you at the airport? What time do you land?" "Love, I'm not coming." Silence. Then quiet, dangerous. "What?" "I'm in hospital. In Cebu. Had another heart scare. They've got me on monitors. I can't fly." "Jesus Christ, Da. How bad? Are you okay? Should I come there?" No, I'm grand. They say I'm grand. Just stress. They're keeping me a few more days to be safe." Another silence. Longer this time. Then her voice changed. Cold. Hurt. Angry. "This is the third time, Da. I know, love, but third time you've canceled on me. First it was Christmas because you were settling in Manila. Then Easter because you couldn't get cheap flights. Now your own daughter's birthday because you're in hospital halfway across the world with nobody there to help you." Taioife. "You sold your life for what? Sitting alone in a bedsit sweating? You could have stayed in Dublin. Stayed near family, near doctors who know your history, near people who actually give a damn about you, but no, you had to chase some fantasy off YouTube. It's not. I'm done, Da. I'm done begging you to come home. I'm done pretending this is anything other than you running away from your life. Call me when you're back in Ireland. Until then, I can't do this." She hung up. I tried calling back 4 times. She didn't answer. Texted her. Nothing. The silence was worse than anything she could have said. I stayed in that Cebu hospital bed for 2 more days, staring at the ceiling, doing the math in my head. Not the financial math this time. The other math. The math of what I'd lost. Got discharged on October 4th. Took a flight back to Dumaguete. The studio felt smaller than ever. Emptier. The karaoke from next door was drilling into my skull. The heat was suffocating. Everything hurt. October through December was a blur of sleepless nights and Excel spreadsheets. I couldn't stop calculating. Couldn't stop running the numbers, looking for some combination that would make this work. 18 months in the Philippines. Let me break it down for you. Set up in Manila. 300,000 pesos. 6 months Manila lifestyle. 1,080,000 pesos. Manila ER visit. 85,000 pesos. PhilHealth enrollment. 150,000 pesos. Move to Dumaguete. 70,000 pesos. 4 months Dumaguete costs. 280,000 pesos. Cebu hospital stay, 380,000 pesos. Cancelled flight, 85,000 pesos. Total spent, 2,430,000 pesos. 40,000 euros gone. Started with 165,000 euros in the bank. Now, 107,000 left. Plus the 18,500 euro SRRV deposit that I'd started researching how to reclaim. The SRRV forums were grim reading. Turned out Graham had been right back in Manila. The deposit wasn't really refundable, not in any practical sense. You had to surrender the visa. File paperwork in person at the PRA office in Manila, wait 6 to 12 months for processing, and even then people were reporting they only got partial refunds. Fees, penalties, administrative costs, it all ate into the deposit. Some people had been waiting 2 years and still hadn't seen a peso. My refundable safety net was a lie. I did the math forward. Current burn rate in Dumaguete, 80,000 pesos a month when you averaged in the Cebu medical trips. That's 1,333 euros. My pension, 1,400 euros. Technically sustainable on paper, but barely, and one more health crisis would wipe me out. At that rate, assuming nothing else went wrong, which was a stupid assumption given my heart, the 107,000 euros would last maybe 6.5 years. I'd be 71. Then what? Live on 1,400 euros a month trying to stretch it to cover 100,000 pesos worth of expenses? The peso to euro exchange rate fluctuated. What if it moved against me? What if my meds got more expensive? What if I needed surgery? I'd be destitute in a foreign country. At 71, with a failing heart and no family within 8,000 kilometers, the YouTube retirement was a con. I finally saw it clearly. Every retirement guru making those videos, they made their money from YouTube, from sponsorships, from Patreon subscribers and affiliate links, and selling courses on how to retire in the Philippines. None of them actually lived on $1,000 a month. None of them lived on pension alone. They had side hustles. They had income streams. They had safety nets they never mentioned in the videos. The cheap retirement existed for them because the retirement content paid for the retirement. It was circular, parasitic. They sold the dream to fund the dream. And mugs like me bought it. December 24th, Christmas Eve. I was sitting in that Dumaguete studio at 2 in the morning. Couldn't sleep because of the heat and the stress and the knowledge that everything had gone wrong. The Christmas karaoke from the houses around me was in full swing. Filipino Christmas is massive. Families together, singing, celebrating. I could hear laughter, children, joy. I was alone in a concrete box with 67 pesos in my pocket, 107,000 euros evaporating in the bank, and my daughter not speaking to me. The truth hit me like a physical weight. I was more stressed than I'd ever been in Dublin, more isolated, more unhealthy. My heart was failing under the pressure. I'd rationed medication to save money. I couldn't afford proper medical care. I lived in constant fear of the next health crisis that would financially destroy me. I'd sold my house, my security, my proximity to family and proper health care, and everything I'd known for 43 years. And for what? Cheaper beer that I drank alone. Warmer weather that made my heart struggle. A beach I never went to because I was too afraid to spend money or stray too far from the studio in case something went wrong. This wasn't retirement. This was a cage. A sweaty, expensive, isolating cage that I'd built myself by believing YouTube over my own daughter. The retirement dream was killing me. Literally. The stress was worse than any job I'd ever had. The isolation was suffocating, and I was running out of time to fix it before my heart gave out completely or my money ran out entirely. I opened my laptop, searched for flights to Dublin. One way this time. The truth was unavoidable now. I'd failed. The experiment was over. The dream was dead. I needed to go home before the Philippines finished what my heart attack had started. I just had to find the courage to admit it. I booked the flight on December 27th. One-way Dumaguete to Dublin via Manila and Frankfurt, 55,000 pesos, 920 euros, cheaper than dying alone in the Philippines. Scheduled departure, January 10th, 2025. Told Rose I was leaving. She looked sad but not surprised. helped me pack one balikbayan box with what little I wanted to keep: some clothes, photos, the laptop. Everything else I left. The landlord could have it. 2,500 pesos to ship the box. 42 euros. Went to the immigration office to surrender my SRRV. Started the process to reclaim the deposit. The officer was polite but clear. 6 to 12 months minimum. Application fees. Processing fees. Administrative costs. No guarantee of full refund. People had been waiting years. I filled out the forms anyway. 18,500 euros was too much to just abandon, even if I'd probably never see it. Final costs in Dumaguete: rent through January, utilities, shipping, tricycle to the airport, odds and ends. Another 30,000 pesos, 500 euros. Left the Philippines on January 10th with 104,000 euros in the bank. Started with 165,000, lost 61,000 euros in 18 months. Plus the SRRV deposit I'd probably never recover. Plus the life I'd sold. The math was simple and brutal. 61,000 euros. Roughly 3,400 euros a month. 57 euros a day. That's what paradise cost me. The flight back was nothing like the flight out. No excitement, no hope, just exhaustion and the crushing weight of failure. I'd sold my house, abandoned my daughter, nearly killed myself chasing a fantasy that never existed. Landed in Dublin on a grey January morning. Cold. Drizzle. The kind of weather I'd spent 18 months trying to escape. It felt like home. Aoife met me at arrivals. We'd talked once since the hospital call brief, strained, her agreeing to help me find a place to live, but making no promises beyond that. She looked tired, older. I'd done that to her. We hugged, brief, awkward. You look terrible, duh. Feel worse. We didn't talk much on the drive. She'd found me a one-bedroom flat in Dundalk. 950 euros a month. Not Dublin too expensive, but close enough to Louth County Hospital for my cardiac appointments. Small, cold, grey light through the windows. But it had proper heating. Running water that didn't need to be heated. A washing machine, kitchen with a real cooker. Pharmacies within walking distance that had my actual medications for 20 euros a month with my medical card reinstated. The pension, 1,400 euros, now covered rent, utilities, groceries, medication. Not comfortable, not what I'd planned, but sustainable. Stable. I wasn't living like a king, but the first was living. Aoife helped me set up the flat. Bought basics: sheets, towels, pots, plates. We didn't talk about the Philippines, not yet. She was there because I was her father, and she's a better person than I deserved. But the trust was gone. I could see it in how she looked at me. Wary, hurt. Before she left that first day, she turned at the door. You chose a fantasy over your family, da. I had no defense. She was right. She visits once a month now. We're rebuilding. Slowly. I attend my cardiac rehab appointments at Louth County Hospital, covered by my Irish medical card. Free, professional, thorough. The cardiologist there reviewed my Philippines medical records and winced. Said I was lucky to be alive. Joined a community center. Started playing darts again on Tuesday nights. Same kind of routine I'd run from. Turns out I needed it. The routine. The familiarity. The lads who know my name. The 104,000 euros sits in a credit union account earning modest interest. It could have been a house deposit, could have helped Aoife with her mortgage, could have been grandchildren's education fund if she ever has kids. Instead, it's the remnant of a dream that nearly killed me. I'm not broke, but I'm not secure either. I'm 66, renting with about half the savings I should have. The retirement I'd planned, comfortable, house paid off, helping family, is gone. replaced by a Dundalk flat and financial anxiety that wakes me at 3 in the morning. So let me tell you what I learned. What I wish someone had told me before I sold my house and moved halfway across the world. The Philippines isn't a scam. The people are lovely, genuinely warm and kind. The place is beautiful. If you visit, you'll have a brilliant time. I'm not bitter about the country or the culture. But the retirement fantasy YouTube sells? That's the scam. They show you sunshine and 60 peso San Miguel. They don't show you the medical costs that'll bankrupt you when you're 65 with a bad heart. They don't show you the visa complications, the SRRV deposits you'll never get back, the loneliness when you're the only foreigner in town and can't speak the language. They don't tell you that affordable only works if nothing goes wrong. And when you're 65 with a dodgy ticker, something always goes wrong. Every YouTube guru making retirement content, they make their money from YouTube, from sponsorships, from Patreon, from selling courses on how to retire cheap. None of them actually live on $1,000 a month. None of them live on pension alone. The cheap retirement exists for them because the retirement content pays for the retirement. It's circular. They sell you the dream to fund their dream, and you're left sweating in a concrete box wondering where it all went wrong. Here's what they don't tell you. That affordable provincial life? It's only affordable if you speak Tagalog, if you eat local food 3 times a day, if you don't need Western comforts or community or access to proper medical care, if you're healthy and 30 and have income beyond your pension. I was none of those things. I was 65 with a cardiac history, no language skills, desperate need for community and medication and health care that worked. And for blokes like me, the Philippines costs the same as Dublin, maybe more. Don't retire to somewhere. Retire with something. A community, a purpose, a reason beyond cheap beer and warm weather. I had nothing but money, and money runs out. I'm back where I started. Except now, I'm renting at 66 with half my savings gone. The dream cost me my house, my daughter's trust, and nearly my life. YouTube won't tell you that, but I will. That's my story. Do with it what you will. And that brings us back to our host. Niall's story is a hard one to hear, but it's one that needs telling. Because he's not alone. I hear versions of this story constantly. Different details, same outcome. Men who sold everything chasing a YouTube dream that doesn't exist for them. Here's what Niall's story teaches us. The Philippines retirement fantasy works for a very specific type of person. Young, healthy, income generating beyond just a pension, culturally adaptable, willing to fully integrate. That's maybe 5% of the people who move there for retirement. For everyone else, for the 65-year-olds with health issues and no side income, the math doesn't work. The retirement vlogs are selling you a lifestyle funded by the vlogs themselves. It's a business model, not a retirement plan. If you're thinking about retiring to the Philippines, here's what you need to do. Research medical costs for your specific conditions. Get real quotes for health insurance at your age with your history. Understand that PhilHealth coverage is limited and private care is expensive. Understand visa requirements fully. That SRRV deposit. It's not easily refundable despite what the website says. Talk to people who've actually tried to get it back. Calculate real monthly expenses. Include healthcare, emergencies, visa renewals, trips home, everything. Then add 30% because you've probably missed something. Visit for extended periods before committing. 3 months minimum. Experience the heat, the isolation, the culture shock. See if you can actually handle it day after day. And never, ever sell your home country safety net until you're absolutely certain. Rent your house out. Keep it. Don't burn the bridge back. Niall sold his house, moved to a country where he didn't speak the language, had no community, couldn't afford proper health care, and wondered why it didn't work. The YouTube videos made it look easy because the people in them had advantages Niall didn't have. They had income. They had language skills. They had partners. They had health. Most importantly, they had something to retire with. Niall had nothing but money, and money alone isn't enough. If Niall's story saved even one person from making his mistake, then telling it was worth it. That's why we do this. Not to bash the Philippines, not to scare people, but to tell the truth that the retirement vlog industry won't. This is Inside the Philippines, where we tell the stories they don't put in the vlogs. If this helped you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, do your research, ask hard questions, and never bet everything on a YouTube promise. Safe travels wherever you end up. Until next time.